Hi everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to use a Zoom Loom. A Zoom Loom is a 4-inch square pin loom made by Shocked. You can use it to make yarn into woven squares, which you can then sew together if you want. In this video I'll be doing a basic square, but in future videos I'll also go over how to make patterns, add beads, weave on the bias, play with color, and some ways to join them. So this is the loom, and it comes with a 6-inch weaving needle and this little instruction book. I'll be showing you pretty much the same thing as the instructions, but sometimes it's easier to get from watching than reading. You'll also need a pair of scissors or yarn snips. On the corners of the loom are raised numbers and some little arrows. They can be hard to see, especially on camera, so I've darkened mine temporarily with pencil. Here's 1 at the bottom left and 2 at the bottom right. 3 and 4 are at the top left and top right. I didn't color on the arrows. You might be able to see them here at corner 2. But it's not essential for this video. The arrows are more of a reminder. Also, as you can see here, most of the pins are in sets of 3, although sometimes at the corners, they're in 2s or 4s. So let's get some yarn. Most of the time when I'm making a square, I'll use one continuous strand of yarn, but today, for easy visuals, I'm going to use a different color in each of the 4 layers. Let's start with this red. The first thing you need to do is measure out about 7 to 8 inches. It's not a precise amount, it just needs to be a bit longer than your 6-inch weaving needle. You can use the needle itself, just measure like that, a little bit longer than it, or measure 8 inches by going around 2 sides of the 4-inch square, like that. Or if you know how wide your hand is, you can use that. My hand is about 8 to 8.5 inches wide. Once you've got your spot, you're gonna tuck that spot into the slot here by corner 1, with the tail hanging down and the end that's connected to your ball of yarn on top. Now, you're going to thread that end between the horizontal line of pins and the vertical line of pins at corner 1. Bring that up to corner 3, slip it through the corner again, and bring it around the set of 2 pins at the end of this line. Then you're going to bring it down to the bottom edge again, like so, and place it between the 2nd and 3rd pins of this set of 4. Then bring it to the right and around the 3rd and 4th pins in this group, between the 2 groups, and up to the top. For the rest of this layer, you're going to wrap it around the 2 right-hand pins in each group of 3. Make sure you aren't pulling the yarn too tight, especially if you're working with something non-stretchy like cotton. Remember, this is going to be woven, so it's going to have some slack to allow it to go up and down between the yarns that cross it. If you've got something with a lot of stretch, like my wool here, you can get away with just a little slack, like this. But if you're using something like cotton, you'll need to really leave it loose. When you get to corner 4, just a second, getting there. Okay, when you get to corner 4, Ignore the fourth pin in the group and wrap the yarn around pins 2 and 3 like you've been doing. Then bring the yarn down to the bottom, slip it between the left pin and the corner pin, and that completes the first layer. Now, if you're working with just one yarn, you just keep going here. But I'm going to pause to switch colors. How about this nice yellow? All right, I've joined them with a temporary knot. When I'm all done, I can untie that and weave in the ends so I don't have a lump of a knot. Anyway, on to layer 2. Bring your yarn around the corner counterclockwise and up past the next pin. Wrap around that too, and take your yarn across to corner 1. In this first group of 3 on the left, we'll bring the yarn between the bottom pin and the middle pin, then wrap around the middle and top pins and go between the 2 groups here and back to the right. In this second layer, you want to wrap the top 2 pins of each group. It can help to hold the top of a group of pins to keep the yarn from sliding out of it when you're moving the next bit across. Remember, not too tight. And keep an eye out for diagonal lines. If you accidentally skip a group, like this, the yarn will look diagonal instead of horizontal or vertical, and that means something needs to be fixed. Ah, yarn tangle. Okay, there we go. And again, going around the top 2 in each group. So you skip the bottom one and go around pins 2 and 3 as you count up from the bottom. Nope, didn't hold on to it. It slid right out. Around those. My yarn isn't pulling off the ball nicely. There we go, that should sort it out temporarily. All right, there we go. All right, when you get to corner 3 again, you'll go between the 2 pins in the last group. That finishes the second layer, so I'm going to switch colors again. I think this bright blue should be good. Okay, to start the third layer, bring your yarn clockwise around the corner and between the 2 pins of the first horizontal group here, like so. Then down to the bottom, where we'll wrap it around the middle 2 pins of this group of 4 here. Now back up, and this time we'll choose the 2 left pins of each group of 3. With the red, we chose the right and middle. With the blue, we're choosing the left and middle. And check this out. As a result, the blue is now, I don't know if you can see it through the yellow, but it's alternating with the red. Like that. It falls neatly into the middle of each gap. That's the goal. Oops. Left 2, almost chose the right 2 for a second. Sorry if you can't see this 100%. My hands are not invisible. All right. When you reach corner 4, still wrap it around the first 2 pins and down to corner 2, where we'll just bring it around between the 2 groups of pins as if we were going to continue the pattern between this group and this group. Now, if you aren't changing colors, the next step is to measure your yarn for the last layer. What you want to do is, starting here at corner 2, wrap the yarn around the whole circumference of the pins. That's 1 circuit, okay? Keep going. We need 5 circuits. There's 2 and almost 3, and my yarn cut off. But you need 5 circuits. It doesn't really matter if you choose to go clockwise or counterclockwise like I just did. Either way, you just wrap it around like that and make 5 circuits. Just get your scissors and yarn snips after 5 circuits and snip it right here at this corner. You don't need to leave a tail. This amount includes an ending tail. On the other hand, if you are changing colors, join your yarn first, right here at this corner, so your starting tail isn't accidentally part of the 5 wraps. There we go, joined on some white. Now, after the join, you'll still need 5 circumferences. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 5 circumferences, just like you would if you didn't change colors. And then cut it right here. Either way, you're going to take this cut end and thread it onto your weaving needle. Depending on your yarn and your dexterity, you may need a tool. I like using a beading needle. Beading needle is this teeny tiny little stick here with a gigantic eye that just collapses down flat. So I just thread that needle and put it through the eye of my big needle and then take off the beading needle. But if you prefer, or if you've got it handy, you might choose to use a regular sewing needle threader, or if you've got a particularly flat threading hook for warping a bigger loom, that might also work. Mine's a little too thick to go through, but I've had a metal one that did work. Anyway, after you've got that threaded and pulled the tail through, unwrap the rest of your 5 wraps, being careful not to undo any of your earlier layers, especially layer 3. Now, you see how right here and here and here and on the other side also, there's a loop along the edge in layer 2, which in my case is yellow. You can see them on this side too. You'll start each row in the weaving by going over one of these loops. You start with the one that's right here next to where you just came out of, so at corner 2 here. You'll go over the loop and then under the strand, the next vertical strand. Over the strand after that and under the one after that. And just keep going over, under, all the way across. You can see that the needle is doing the exact opposite of the existing, in my case yellow, horizontal strands. It's going under layer 1 and over layer 3. Oops, I think I went through that one. There we go. So it's opposing the existing horizontal threads. There we go. When you get to the end of the row, the needle should go under the last vertical strand here, and then you can just pull it through. Pull, 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 pull. And pull the yarn after it. Make sure that you don't pull it too tight. I've got it all tangled up here, I'm untangling it. You don't want to pull it too tight so that you pull this one way out that way. But you also don't want to leave loops hanging off the edge like that either. Just pull it until it's snug. There we go. You may find that the yarn you just pulled across isn't going quite straight. This one is, but sometimes they don't. If not, it'll be arcing away from the row of pins under it. The layer 2 yarn just above the yarn you just wove is almost certainly arcing up. See how it just a little bit at the edges is easy to see. You have a few options. You can try to ignore this arcing up, but it'll make weaving your next row harder. You can pack them down in a couple places with your fingernail, which may or may not work great. Or you can grab a weaving comb to pack them into place. If you don't have a weaving comb, like I don't, guess what works pretty well? A common fork. Just make sure it's clean and dry. So we'll just slide it in there and push the first row of layer 2 up against your first row of layer 4. You're going to need room between the first and second rows there to weave your next row. All right, so the next row is the same instructions, but from a different perspective. Now you're going to start on the left instead of the right, but you'll still center your needle over the next loop up. So see how this yellow loop is around the second and third pins as you count from the bottom. So I'll go between those 2 pins over the yellow loop and then under the one after it, over, under, and I'm picking up the same yarns that I picked up in my first woven row, because the layer 2 yarn in between is tying them down the opposite way. Okay, this is really hard for me to do with my left hand. I usually spin this 180 between rows, like that. Not everyone does that. Figure out what works best for you. But this way I can use my right hand, which goes a lot faster. I'm moving the blue and red strands a little bit with my other hand as I'm holding the loom in place, too. That's something that you may find helps you, or it may not. And just pull that one across through. Keep the other tails out of it if you've got more than one tail from changing colors. There we go, almost to the end, gently into place. And here you can see this one is arcing up even more. So I'll spin this back around and pack it with the fork. It's gonna be loose and stretchy at first, so it's not gonna pack super well, but it'll get easier further ahead. All right, I'm gonna do the third row here. And once again, we're going under the yarns from layer 1 and over the yarns from layer 3. And we started by going in the middle of the layer 2 loop. And when you come out of the yarn over here, you want to make sure you go between, put the needle between the two groups of pins. So it wants to go further out, further up here because of the yarns pressing against it in the middle. So you're going to have to push it to get it into this spot. There we go. Get it untangled from the pins at the edge here. Wants to wrap around extra pins. And once again, pack it together. Okay, I'm gonna do a few more rows and then check in with you guys again. Okay, I've woven about halfway up. And can you see how, even with me packing it together with the fork regularly, it's starting to crowd past the horizontal lines that I'm trying to make? The yarn is pushing up in the middle, and that pushes the needle to try to go diagonal. And instead of, when I finish this row, being able to put it properly in between these pins right here, it wants to go all the way over here. So I'm going to have to like push it down there, which is not ideal. It's having to do that too much is a good way to get hand strain. Come on. There we go. With me pushing it down with my other hand and angling it with this hand, I did manage to get it to go through in the right spot. But it's getting more difficult. Okay? So what I'm going to do is, in addition to just after every row packing it in, I'm going to go back in here now that there's some structure and start back near the beginning and just pack it a little more and go through every 2 or 3 rows and pull it back toward the beginning. Okay? This will be especially crucial if you're working with, okay, hang on a second. All right, I grabbed some. If you're working with this size of cotton, you can work with this size of cotton. It's what I made this one out of. It totally works, but it is such a pain. You will have to pack like this all the time, and it is just so dense and non-stretchy. It is so frustrating. Seriously, cotton is not a beginner-friendly yarn for pin loom weaving. Do your first few squares with something else. Wool. Wool is great. This is wool. It still needs packed. You can use finer yarns. It'll be less dense of a resulting fabric. More mesh-like and with holes in it. But it'll be easier. So see the spaces I'm getting by having scooted each row just a little bit. Now I've got another like 3 millimeters, 1/4 inch there, something like that. Comes from getting all those rows packed together just a little bit. So you'll need to do that sometimes, to just go back through and re-squish everything in a little bit tighter. So now that's packed together more, and there's room for me to continue. So skipping ahead again. All right, almost done. Your second to last row, which is row 15 if you're counting, will end just below corner 3. So almost there. There we go. Your very last row, you're going to need to pack down the previous rows again. Like that. But even more so, because fitting the needle through this last space here can be a little challenging. The fork helps, but I also usually pack this row with my needle by going between the groups. Like that. And starting the row can be a little tricky because the strands at this corner are very close together. Start by going over the diagonal one here. For me, that means in this spot where I've joined the yellow and the blue together. So you'll go over this diagonal one and dip down and scoop up that layer 1 strand there and go over the next one and under. Okay, good. That's through the hardest part. You'll weave the rest of the row as normal. You'll notice, if you look, that you're pushing up the red loops for me, which is layer 1, but they're being held down on the outside by the loops of layer 3. So this is going to interlock the edge so that it doesn't unravel. If you were to leave it with this yellow one, a layer 2 row as the top edge, it would just fall out because it would go between the loops the way they are when they're loose. Running one last pass through here is important to interlock the edge and make sure it doesn't come apart. All right. It will get a little harder to move the needle up and down as you get closer to this end here. It helps, like I've done before, to move the vertical strands with your other hand, but it can be tricky to get in there. There we go. Ooh, got it through. Keep the blue and yellow tails out of it. There we go. Yay! Okay, all that's left now is weaving in the ends, which is easier while it's still on the loom. You might not do this if, for example, you're planning on using the tails to sew some of your squares together. But this is how to do it if you're going to do it. See how at the end here, the last thing this strand of yarn does is go under the last vertical strand here, which for me is red. So we're going to go over that strand. And then join back up with this last row here and go over the next strand as well. So we're going over this red one and over this blue one. And then we're going to just copy the white, the last row there from then on. So going over what it goes over and under what it goes under. Just right along the edge there. You can go all the way along the row or just part way. I like to go about halfway across, like about that much there. When you pull it through, which you'll slide right through the corner there, make sure you don't pull so much that this bit right here pulls hard on this last vertical strand and bends it out of place. Pull it right up against it, but no further. And then if you want, you can leave that long to do something with it later, or just go ahead and trim it off right next to your fabric, but be careful not to cut your fabric. Now you go down to corner 1. We're ignoring these tails temporarily because those came from my color changes. So if you didn't change colors partway through, you don't have these tails, but you will have this tail at corner 1. So you're going to take this beginning tail out of the slot and thread that on your needle. The reason it's the length it is, the reason we wanted it to be a little longer than the needle, is to give the needle room to turn around after it's threaded and go back here. We're going to do the same general idea here as we did up in this edge, but since the last thing this yarn does is go over that horizontal strand, we're going to start by going under that first horizontal strand and the one after it. And then once again, we'll just mimic what that edge yarn does. Going over what it goes over and under what it goes under. And going up this vertical edge here. So just like we originally had this loom positioned, I've got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And with the tail that we ended on, we went back along the top horizontal edge. And with the beginning tail, we're going back up this vertical edge. And once again, I'm going to go about halfway up the edge with the weaving in and pull it through, snug but not too tight. Careful with that last bit. And trim it. There we go. All done. I'll worry about weaving in these ends later, or not, as the case may be. all that you need to do now is slide this off the loom. Now, the Zoom Loom has no heads on the pins, so you can just push up to slide it off, or I like to run the needle like this, but under the fabric. So right against that edge, and use it to push that edge up and over, or you can just put your hand underneath and push up like that. Either way. And all done. That is certainly vibrant, and I would not choose those colors for a project personally, but it's certainly visible, and that was the goal. All right, let me know how it goes for you and what other videos you'd like to see first. Have a great day.